The rain pounded against the windows of Jennifer's downtown Seattle office as she stared at her computer screen, pretending to review contracts. At 35, she was a senior partner at one of the city's top law firms, respected and successful. But her personal life had become a waiting game she was losing. Jennifer had spent the last 3 years in a pattern she couldn't break, waiting to feel aroused before initiating intimacy, waiting for desire to strike her like lightning, waiting for her body to signal readiness before engaging sexually. The problem was, the signal never came. Her last 2 relationships had ended with the same complaint. She was always not in the mood. She'd tried everything: scheduling sex, reading romance novels, watching videos. Nothing worked. The arousal she was waiting for simply never appeared. "Maybe I'm just not a sexual person anymore," she'd told her therapist 6 months ago. "Maybe that part of me is just gone." But something about that conclusion felt wrong. She remembered being passionate once. She remembered desire. Where had it gone? And more importantly, was it ever coming back? The turning point came during a women's wellness retreat in the San Juan Islands that her best friend Melissa had practically forced her to attend. The workshop facilitator, a sex educator named Dr. Chen, said something that made Jennifer's pen freeze mid-note. Many women wait passively for arousal to appear before engaging sexually. But arousal often doesn't work that way, especially for women. Research shows that for most women, arousal is responsive. It doesn't appear spontaneously. You have to actively create the conditions for it. Jennifer felt something shift in her chest. She'd been waiting, passively, for years. After the session, Melissa pulled her aside. "Jen, I know someone who could help you with this. A sexologist in Seattle named Beto Alves. He specializes in exactly what Dr. Chen was talking about, teaching women to actively cultivate their own arousal instead of waiting for it to magically appear." Jennifer wanted to dismiss it, but Dr. Chen's words kept echoing. You have to actively create it. 2 weeks later, she found herself outside a converted loft in Capitol Hill, reading a bronze plaque. Beto Alves, Sexology and Somatic Energy Work. Sexologist Beto greeted her with a warm, professional smile. At 35, he had a presence that was both grounding and energizing, dressed in a simple gray shirt and dark pants. His eyes conveyed genuine interest and understanding. "Jennifer, welcome. Thank you for being here." The office was inviting. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, plants, the subtle scent of sage. Everything created a sense of safety and openness. They sat across from each other, and Beto began with unexpected questions. Not about her sex life directly, but about her approach to life in general. Was she active or passive in pursuing what she wanted? Did she wait for inspiration or create it? How did she approach other forms of pleasure? Food, exercise, creativity. Jennifer realized with uncomfortable clarity that she was passive in almost everything pleasurable. She waited for hunger before eating, waited for motivation before exercising, waited for inspiration before creating. "You mentioned waiting to feel aroused," Beto said gently. "But arousal isn't something that happens to you. It's something you participate in creating. For many women, arousal is a response to deliberate cultivation, not a spontaneous event." Jennifer leaned forward. "So what do I do?" "You learn to actively generate the conditions for arousal," Beto explained. "Through intentional practices, breath, movement, fantasy, touch, energy work. You stop being a passive recipient and become an active participant in your own sexuality." The first assignment Beto gave Jennifer seemed strange. Create a pleasure ritual unrelated to sex. Pick something that brings you pleasure, a bath, dancing, eating chocolate, and do it with complete intentionality. Not because you happen to feel like it, but because you're choosing to create pleasure. Jennifer chose a bath. That evening, instead of her usual quick shower, she deliberately filled the tub, added oils, lit candles, played music she loved. At first, it felt forced. She didn't feel like taking a bath. But as she settled into the warm water, something shifted. She realized she was creating the experience of pleasure through her choices, not waiting for it to appear. In the next session, Beto introduced intentional breathwork. Breath is one of the most powerful tools for shifting your state, he explained. Most people wait to feel relaxed before breathing deeply, but you can create relaxation through deliberate breath. He taught her a pattern. Deep inhale through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, slow exhale through the mouth for 6. Within 10 minutes, Jennifer felt her entire nervous system shift. She hadn't waited to feel calm. She'd actively created it. This same principle applies to arousal, Beto said. You can wait for it to appear randomly, or you can use specific practices to generate it. In the 4th session, they began working with arousal cultivation practices. I want you to set aside time, 20 minutes, specifically to create arousal, Beto instructed. Not to have sex, not to reach orgasm. Just to practice generating arousal through deliberate means. How? Jennifer asked. Start with breath to shift your nervous system. Then add movement, hip circles, spinal undulations. Engage fantasy, whatever images or scenarios feel activating. Touch yourself, but not with a goal, just to build sensation. You're learning to actively turn on your arousal system, instead of waiting for it to switch on randomly. The first time Jennifer tried, she felt ridiculous. Sitting on her bed in the middle of the afternoon, she began breathing deeply. Then she started moving her hips in slow circles, feeling absurd. She tried to engage a fantasy, but felt disconnected. This is stupid, she thought. I don't feel anything. But then she remembered Beto's words. You're not waiting to feel it first. You're creating it. She persisted. Breath, movement. She touched her thighs, her belly, not erotically, but just to create sensation. She imagined scenarios that once excited her, and then, gradually, something began to stir. Not overwhelming desire, but a warmth, a tingling, the beginning of arousal. She realized with shock that it was working. She wasn't waiting for arousal to strike her. She was actively building it, like starting a fire with kindling. Over the following weeks, Jennifer practiced regularly. Some sessions, the arousal built quickly. Other times, it took longer. But the crucial shift was this. She was no longer passive. She was an active participant. In the 6th session, Beto introduced energy cultivation practices. Sexual energy isn't just physical, he explained. It's energetic. We can cultivate it through visualization and breathwork. He guided her through a practice where she visualized warm energy gathering in her pelvis, then circulating through her entire body with each breath. The sensation was subtle, but real. A building warmth and aliveness. This is the foundation of tantric practice, Beto said. Consciously working with sexual energy, not just waiting for it to randomly appear. Jennifer began incorporating this into her daily practice. 20 minutes each morning, deliberately cultivating arousal, not for sex, just as a practice. And she noticed profound changes. She started feeling more alive in general, more present, more confident. The practice of actively creating arousal was teaching her to actively create other states she wanted. Confidence, joy, peace. In the 8th session, Beto added another layer. Sensory priming. Throughout the day, prime your nervous system for arousal, he suggested. Wear fabrics that feel good against your skin. Listen to music that makes you feel alive. Eat foods mindfully, dance while cooking. You're teaching your body that pleasure is available, not something rare you have to wait for. Jennifer implemented this immediately. She bought silk underwear that felt luxurious. She played sensual music while getting ready for work. She moved her body throughout the day, even just subtle hip movements at her desk. The cumulative effect was remarkable. Her body was learning that pleasure wasn't something that happened occasionally by chance. It was something she could access and create anytime. By the 10th session, Jennifer had experienced a fundamental shift, but Beto mentioned there was a deeper level available. "You've learned to cultivate arousal on your own," he said. "The next level is alchemia intima, inner alchemy. It's a tantric practice where we use conscious sexual union to amplify and elevate sexual energy to its highest potential." He explained carefully. "It's based on everything you've learned: active participation, intentional cultivation, energy work. But instead of practicing alone, I guide you through the process in a shared container. The goal isn't orgasm, it's learning to consciously direct and elevate sexual energy." Jennifer felt both nervous and curious. She'd come so far in reclaiming her sexuality as something she actively participated in rather than passively waited for. This felt like the natural next step. "I'm ready," she said. The Alchemia Intima session was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. Jennifer arrived at the office as gray Seattle light filtered through the windows, the city quiet below. The space had been transformed. Soft candlelight, the scent of sandalwood, ambient music, deep, resonant tones that seemed to vibrate in her chest. Beto greeted her with the same professional warmth as always. They began with tea, ensuring Jennifer felt completely comfortable and safe. He explained each stage, emphasizing her control and agency throughout. "Remember," Beto said, "this isn't something that happens to you. You're an active participant. You're consciously choosing to cultivate and elevate this energy." They started with 45 minutes of synchronized breathwork. Sitting face to face, breathing in unison, Jennifer felt her nervous system shift into a heightened state of awareness, not waiting for it, actively creating it. Beto then guided her through progressive energy cultivation, visualization of warmth and light building in her pelvis, then rising through her spine. Jennifer actively engaged, not passively receiving, but deliberately generating the sensation. As they moved through gentle touch and tantric postures, Jennifer maintained active participation. She wasn't waiting to feel aroused. She was consciously building it, breath by breath, movement by movement. When they reached the sexual union that characterizes alchemia intima, Jennifer experienced something transformative. Every sensation was amplified because she was actively engaging with it. She wasn't waiting for pleasure to happen. She was creating it through her breath, her attention, her intention, her movement. The energy built not randomly, but because she was deliberately cultivating it. Waves of sensation coursed through her, and she consciously directed them through her entire body, using the practices she'd learned. And then the revelation hit her with stunning clarity. For years, she'd been waiting to feel desire, waiting for arousal to strike her, waiting for her body to signal readiness, passive, powerless. But arousal wasn't something that happened to her when conditions were perfect. It was something she could actively create through intentional practices: breath, movement, fantasy, touch, energy work. She wasn't broken. She just hadn't known she could be the active creator of her own arousal. The energy continued building, spiraling through her in waves she was consciously amplifying. She felt powerful, alive, completely present. Tears streamed down her face, not from sadness, but from the joy of reclaiming this part of herself. This wasn't just sexual awakening, it was empowerment. Afterward, wrapped in a soft blanket, Jennifer lay still, integrating the profound experience. "I spent years waiting," she finally said. "Like arousal was something that would just happen to me if I waited long enough." "Many women do," Beto replied gently. "We're taught that desire should be spontaneous, that we should just feel like it. But for most women, desire is responsive and requires active cultivation. You've learned to create it instead of waiting for it." They talked for hours as the candles burned low. Beto explained the research on responsive desire, how cultural myths had taught women to be passive recipients of sexuality rather than active participants. "What you've learned," he said, "extends beyond sexuality. You've learned that you can actively create states you want to experience: arousal, pleasure, joy, peace, instead of waiting for them to randomly appear." In the months that followed, Jennifer's life transformed in ways that rippled far beyond sexuality. She continued her daily arousal cultivation practice, not always leading to sex, just as a way of staying connected to her vitality and learning to actively create the states she wanted. When she began dating again, she brought this new understanding. She didn't wait to feel like being intimate. She actively created arousal through the practices she'd learned: breathwork, movement, fantasy, energy cultivation. And sex became profoundly satisfying because she was an active participant, not a passive recipient. But the changes extended everywhere. She stopped waiting to feel motivated before exercising. She actively created motivation. She stopped waiting for inspiration. She actively cultivated it. She stopped waiting for confidence. She generated it through deliberate practices. She learned the fundamental lesson: she could be the active creator of her own experience, instead of a passive recipient waiting for life to happen to her. 6 months after Alchimia Intima, Jennifer sent sexologist Beto a message. "Thank you for teaching me I don't have to wait. I can create." His response came quickly. "You always had that power. You just needed to remember it." Jennifer smiled, setting down her phone. Outside her window, Seattle was gray and drizzling as always. But instead of waiting for the sun, she turned on music, lit candles, and created her own warmth. She closed her eyes, placed her hands on her heart, and began breathing deeply. Not waiting, creating.